The digital clock at the gas station flickered from 2:59 a.m. to 3 a.m., casting an eerie green glow on Travis's hollow cheeks. The cold and lonesome night outside was much like his life, silent, still, and starless. The flicker of the fluorescent lights above echoed through the empty gas station, accompanying the occasional hum of the cooling refrigerator in the corner. Travis leaned against the counter, his hands absent-mindedly tracing the worn-out edges of the cash register. His life had fallen into an unvarying pattern, a ceaseless loop of ringing up sparse sales and mindlessly staring at the endless expanse of the desolate road outside. Travis's existence was a blur of dullness, marked only by the presence of his reticent mother and the occasional truck drivers who passed through the isolated town. His nights were consumed by long, uneventful shifts at the gas station, while his days were spent recuperating from the exhausting loneliness of those nights. His mother, a quiet woman with a weathered face and distant eyes, was the only family he had. They shared the same house, each lost in their own solitude. Their conversations were scarce, their interactions minimal. Travis often found himself wishing he had someone, anyone, to share his thoughts with, to break the relentless monotony of his life. Truck drivers were his only source of human interaction, each a fleeting moment of contact with the outside world. They'd share tales from the road, their stories filling up the silent night like a splash of color on a drab canvas. These sporadic exchanges were what Travis looked forward to, the only highlights in his otherwise uneventful life. Every now and then, he'd find himself staring at the road that disappeared into the vast expanse, his mind consumed by fantasies of an exciting life beyond this desolate town, a life filled with adventures and stories of his own, not ones borrowed from the transient truck drivers. He yearned for a change, a break from the tedious rhythm of his existence. As the clock struck 3 a.m., the lonesome night outside remained unchanged. The fluorescent lights continued to flicker overhead, and the refrigerator hummed in monotonous harmony. Life at the gas station stood still, as it always did. Travis looked out at the vast expanse one more time, his dreams of a more fulfilling life quietly echoing in the empty gas station. But that night was different, for unbeknownst to him, change was about to arrive in the guise of an old man. The shrill sound of the gas station's bell echoed through the air. As the door creaked open, Travis looked up from his position behind the counter, eyes meeting a man worn by age and weathered by time. He bore the telltale signs of a life lived on the open road. In his sturdy boots caked with dust, hands calloused from steering heavy loads, and skin bronzed and lined from years under the sun. The old man exchanged a curt nod with Travis, making his way to the coffee machine with the weariness of a long journey etched onto his movements. As Travis watched him pour the steaming liquid into a styrofoam cup, the silence was broken by the old man's gravelly voice. "My son used to work a job just like this, you know," he said, his gaze distant as he stirred the coffee. "But he wasn't one for standing still. He wanted something more, just like you do." Travis's eyes rose in surprise, his interest piqued by the old man's statement. "How did you," he started to ask, but the old man merely chuckled, lifting the coffee to his lips. "It's in your eyes, young man," he said, sipping his coffee. "My boy had that same look." Over the hum of the refrigerator and the low drone of the radio, the old man wove tales of his son's journey from a life much like Travis's own to a job as a crew member in industrial fishing. He spoke of roaring seas and the thrill of casting large nets, the challenge of battling the elements, and the camaraderie of a team dependent on each other for survival. He painted a picture of hefty paychecks and a sense of fulfillment that Travis found intoxicating. He's out there now, somewhere on the Pacific, earning better money than either of us ever did at your age, the old man continued, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. As the old man paid for his coffee and bid himself farewell, Travis was left with a lingering thought that shook him from his monotonous stupor. Maybe he, too, could escape this life. Maybe he could seek out this opportunity, take the risk, and plunge into the unknown. His gaze drifted back to the endless road outside the gas station, but this time, it was not just a symbol of monotony, but a potential path towards a new life. A spark was kindled within him, the prospect of change, the lure of a better life, and for the first time in a long time, Travis went home that night not with a sense of dread for another day of the same, but with a newfound ambition that promised to break the cycle of his unfulfilled existence. Emboldened by the old man's words, Travis had swapped his dull gas station uniform for the hardy attire of an industrial fisherman. The distant roar of the sea that once existed only in his imagination had become a daily reality. The vast expanse of the Pacific lay before him, an unending mirror reflecting the cloud-studded sky. The thrill of his new job was dampened by the relentless challenges it presented. The work was grueling, long hours of hauling nets teeming with fish, struggling against the force of the waves and the physical toll it took on his body. His hands, once soft from the ease of his previous life, were now hardened by relentless labor. But there was a certain satisfaction in this, the satisfaction of hard work, of earning his living not merely by ringing up sales, but by a direct fight against the elements. Travis worked with a team of rough yet experienced young men who spent years at sea. He was particularly close to Max, a burly yet kind-hearted fisherman who had taken Travis under his wing. Together, they faced the unpredictability of the ocean, their bond deepening with each passing day. The true test of their resolve came on a night when a thunderstorm brewed over the ocean. The peaceful waves turned furious, hurling the ship around like a toy. The thunder roared louder than any sound Travis had heard before, its fury mirrored by the ocean's tumult. The crew worked together, battling the relentless storm, their hearts pounding in sync with the ship's swaying. When the storm passed, they found themselves in an unrecognizable expanse of the ocean, devoid of any landmark they could use to find their way back. Their devices had lost reception in the storm, leaving them stranded in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with no contact with the outside world. As the sun rose, revealing the unending blue that surrounded them, the crew exchanged fearful glances. Their vessel, once a beacon of livelihood, had become a floating prison. The vastness of the sea, which Travis had once found enticing, was now a haunting reminder of their isolation. In this unfathomable isolation, Their survival instincts were put to the test. The excitement and thrill of Travis's new life had been replaced by an undeniable fear. But within that fear was a determination to survive, to fight the odds, and make it back home. And in this resolve, Travis realized, laying the adventure he had sought. It was harsh, it was terrifying, but it was real, and it was his. Days morphed into weeks, time weaving an invisible thread around their stranded vessel. The initial panic had faded into a steady rhythm of survival. Life on board became a game of rationing the dwindling supplies, with water being the most precious commodity. As their freshwater supply diminished, the crew started to rely on their catch for sustenance. Fish was a poor substitute for their regular meals, and the high protein content only served to increase their thirst. As dehydration began to set in, Travis saw the faces of his crewmates growing gaunter by the day. With each passing hour, Travis realized that his survival was hanging by a thread. His thoughts wandered back to the life he left behind, the monotonous yet safe existence of the gas station, the quiet nights, the silent exchanges with his mother. The sea, once a beacon of adventure, was now a suffocating trap. In the midst of his despair, he remembered the determined glint in Max's eyes. Max had been his partner, his mentor, a beacon of resilience in these trying times. As Travis approached him one night, their silhouettes lit by the soft glow of the moon. "We need to survive," he began, his voice just above a whisper. "I don't want to die out here, Max. We have more to lose than anyone else on board." His words hung in the air, leaving an unsaid proposition between them. It was a desperate measure, one that would tilt the scales of survival in their favor. They worked in hushed whispers, refilling their own containers with the remaining fresh water and replacing it in the main supply of seawater. The salty water was virtually undetectable amidst the growing desperation. In this act of self-preservation, Travis crossed a line he never thought he would. Yet, he felt a sense of relief, a glimpse of hope. In a world where survival was the only rule, he had chosen his path. As Travis lay on his makeshift bed that night, he stared out into the starlit sky, the guilt of his actions sinking beneath the overwhelming will to survive. As the days went on, the crew's morale plummeted, their bodies growing weaker and their spirits dimmer. The hunger gnawing at their insides was outmatched only by their insatiable thirst. The salty seawater they had been unknowingly consuming was taking its toll, their lips chapped and their tongues dry as sandpaper. It was during this dire time that they encountered a new threat, a presence lurking in the depth of the ocean. A shadow began to form under the water, an immense figure that moved with eerie grace, stirring the otherwise calm ocean surface. The figure gradually revealed itself as a massive whale, its body a formidable presence under the vessel. The realization of what it was struck fear in the hearts of the crew. Whales were known to be peaceful creatures, but the size of this one and its inexplicably aggressive behavior was unlike anything they had ever seen. With a sudden ferocity that sent shockwaves through the boat, the whale rammed the vessel, shaking them to their core. They clung to the deck, their heartbeats thundering in their ears as they braced themselves for another attack. The whale's subsequent strikes were relentless, each one tipping the boat precariously. Amidst the chaos, Travis and Max clung to each other, their desperate eyes locking onto one another. Travis could see his fear mirrored in Max's eyes, a grim testament to the grim situation they found themselves in. With one final mighty shove, the whale managed to partly overturn the vessel, causing it to start taking on water. As the ship began to sink, the weakened crew members, already debilitated by dehydration, were unable to muster the strength to fight against the pull of the cold, unforgiving ocean. Travis and Max, however, still had a bit of fight left in them. Fueled by desperation and the will to survive, they jumped into the icy water, struggling against the pull of the sinking ship and the powerful waves, but their bodies were weak and their strokes sluggish. Eventually, they could fight no longer. The cold seeped into their bones, their muscles ached, and the strength leaving their bones entirely. They surrendered to the depths, their world becoming a blurry, wavy distortion as the darkness closed in. Travis could see the sun, once a beacon of hope, fading away into the nothingness, his consciousness wavering, and then everything went black. Travis awoke to the sensation of gritty sand beneath his hands and a soft breeze teasing his damp hair. As his senses returned, he blinked his eyes open to a surreal sight. He was laying on the shore of what appeared to be a small, deserted island. His heart hammered in his chest as he pushed himself upright and looked around. There, a short distance away, lay Max, unconscious but breathing. He stumbled over to Max, shaking him gently. As Max's eyes fluttered open, they shared a look of bewildered relief. They were alive, washed ashore on this strange, desolate island. In the following days, they navigated their new reality. The island was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was deserted, save for sparse vegetation and occasional chirping insects. However, it was the island's unpredictable weather that was the most peculiar. Each day was an erratic dance of sunlight, rain, wind, and chilling cold. The sun would bathe the island in its warm glow, only to be suddenly replaced by gloomy fog. Rain showers would abruptly descend upon them, transforming into fierce winter storms with equally little warning. These abrupt shifts created a landscape that was as stunning as it was unsettling. With no sign of rescue, they set about making the island their home. They shared stories to fill the silence, reminiscing about their former lives and exchanging dreams for the future. The conversations were a soothing balm, alleviating the harsh reality of their predicament, even if only for a little while. Food and fresh water were scarce, but they made do. Their energy waned as they lived off the minimal vegetation and whatever marine life they could catch. As the days dragged on, their bodies became leaner, their faces more gaunt. The reflection of their desperate state was in their eyes, a dull glaze that was becoming increasingly hard to ignore. One day, while exploring the interior of the island, Travis and Max stumbled upon a small spring bubbling with clear water. The sight was a revelation, a literal lifeline in their dire circumstances. But the joy was short-lived when Travis realized the limited nature of this source. His mind buzzed with grim calculations. If they shared this meager water source, it was likely to run dry before they could be rescued. If only one of them used it, the chances of survival increased, at least for one of them. The bitter taste of the decision he had to make filled his mouth. This was survival, and in survival, the choices were never easy. The discovery of the spring sparked a flicker of hope in Travis's heart, but the realization of the limited water did the exact opposite. But the limits of the water he chose to keep to himself. The secret weighed heavily on him, a stone sinking in the ocean of his consciousness. Max was oblivious to his inner turmoil. His trust in Travis was steadfast as ever. He'd become more than a partner to Travis during their shared ordeal. He'd become a friend. And yet, as the days wore on and their rations dwindled, Travis's resolve solidified. He had to ensure his survival. His plan took shape on an evening painted by the most mesmerizing sunset you'd ever seen. The sky was a riot of colors, hues of red and orange blending together to create a tapestry of unimaginable beauty. It was a moment of tranquility amidst their ordeal, a moment Travis decided to use as a distraction. "Man, have you ever seen a sunset so orange before?" he asked, his voice a whisper against the crashing waves. Max turned to take in the spectacle, and in that moment of distraction, Travis struck. It was swift, a single blow with a large rock he'd been carrying. Max fell, his body collapsing onto the sand as the life ebbed out of him. Travis felt a sickening twist in his stomach, a guilt that was quickly overshadowed by a grim sense of determination. He held Max as his life slipped away, promising to relay his love to his family and ensuring him that his end had been noble. He grieved for his friend, but also for himself, for the part of him that he'd left behind in the act of survival. The task of burying Max was a quiet one. Travis marked his grave with a simple pile of stones, a humble testament to his friend's life and sacrifice. His sorrow was cut short by a distant rumble, growing louder by the second. He lifted his eyes from Max's grave, squinting towards the horizon where the sound was originating from. The setting sun was rapidly giving way to the darkness, but against the fading backdrop, a tiny light emerged, a glimmer of hope in the encroaching night. The distant sound grew louder, the dot of light growing bigger and more distinct. A surge of adrenaline coursed through Travis's veins as he realized what it was: a helicopter. His heart pounded as he stumbled toward the beach, waving his arms and yelling at the top of his lungs, desperately trying to catch the pilot's attention. The helicopter veered closer, its spotlight illuminating the beach and highlighting Travis in its bright beam. The realization hit him with a jarring force. They had been rescued, but the victory felt hollow. As he watched the helicopter land, the image of Max's lifeless body buried in his mind. The medics were quick to attend to him, their voices a distant murmur as they checked his vitals and provided immediate aid. "Was anyone else with you?" one of them asked. Travis looked into the medic's earnest eyes, and with a heavy heart, he answered, "No, I was alone." Back on the mainland, Travis was treated and monitored until he had a full recovery. Life had given him a second chance, and he found himself back in the familiarity of his gas station job. A harsh contrast to the unforgiving island and tumultuous ocean. Late one night, as he stood behind the counter, lost in the mundane humdrum of his job, the door chime rang, stirring him from his thoughts. He looked up to see the old man from that fateful day walking in, his face etched with worry and sorrow. They spoke, The old man informed Travis of his son's disappearance, the same son who Travis had buried on that desolate island. The revelation was a painful one, opening fresh wounds. He stayed silent, swallowing the truth and the guilt that it brought. Travis shared fabricated stories of the old man's son, painting a picture of a noble, brave man. A silence fell over them as they lost themselves in their thoughts. The old man broke it, his gaze fixed on the setting sun outside the window. He whispered, "Man, have you ever seen a sunset so orange before?" Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Until next time.